rules because predictable behaviour can be very comforting. It's nice to know what to do if you attend an event, which is why there are so many helpful hints about things like formal dinners, works functions, weddings and funerals. These are stages in life which will come up for us all, and it's good to have a game plan. Minding your P's and Q's. The expression mind your P's and Q's, meaning be on your best behaviour, has been around for so long that no one can quite recall where it came from. There are many candidates. 1. It was a foreshortened admonishment to children to remember to say please and thank you. 2. It was a 17th century admonishment for drinkers to keep an eye on how many pints and quarts they consumed. 3. It was an 18th century admonishment for sailors to pay attention to their P's, a sailor's peacoat, and Q's, a traditional nautical ponytail. I could carry on through history seeking a meaning via the Norman invasion of 1066, specific reading symbols in medieval Latin texts, or how early printers might easily confuse lowercase p's and q's, but we have too much to do to get sidetracked. The fact that we don't know the precise origin of the phrase seems appropriate, for minding your p's and q's at all is far from an exact science. Writing the rules. It's important to understand that rules about manners are not laws. They're not really even rules, they're suggestions. You don't have to keep them, but you may get along better in life if you do. Over the years, there have been many attempts to write down propositions for behaviour to help grease the wheels of the great social machine. Probably the book most responsible for kicking off modern ideas about this was the book I mentioned right at the outset, De Civilitate Morum Puerilam, on civility in boys, which was written in 1530 by Erasmus of Rotterdam. He also wrote the Handbook for the Christian Knight and the rather jollier In Praise of Folly, in which Folly mucks about as a goddess having been brought up by two nymphs called Inebriation and Ignorance. But sadly, we haven't the time. Quite what it was about 16th century boys in Rotterdam that required a whole volume of suggestions for better behaviour is hard to know. But in the first 6 years of the book's publication, it was reprinted 30 times. The first English version came out in 1532. From then on, it became popular to instruct young people in the basics of civil behaviour. Erasmus didn't invent the idea of good conduct. You find it written about as soon as you find writing of any kind in history. There's a papyrus in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris from the Egyptian 5th dynasty, that's about 2414 to 375 BC, called the Maxims of Tahuti, which is said to have been written by one of the top officials to King Isisi. It's low on jokes, but in it, Tahuti recommends the sort of behaviour that still seems quite a good idea today. Truthfulness, self-control, kindness to others. Evolving etiquette. I mentioned the past, but it's critical not to get stuck in it. The way manners are expressed evolves on an almost daily basis. In the 12th century, for example, it was recommended that one should cough very loudly when entering a house, for there may be something doing which you ought not to see. These days, it's easier to ring the bell. The word etiquette derives from the French word for small labels or tickets attached to bags to tell you what was inside them. In the same way, protocol comes from the Greek protokolon, which was a sheet glued to a manuscript case to show its contents. Labels or stickers attached to things proclaiming what they were and where they belonged gradually developed into written instructions for how to behave. They would be posted, for example, outside a soldier's billet or lodging to tell him what was expected. Interestingly, in Danish, the word billet means ticket, just like etiquette. Those who ran Louis XIV's palace at Versailles used etiquettes, little cards, to remind courtiers to keep off the grass or whatever else was considered de rigueur in court life. In fact, a lot of the words associated with manners have their origins in the royal courts of the past. The word courteous even has court in it. It starts popping up in the mid-14th century and comes from the Old French courtes, having courtly bearing or manners. The German word hübsch, meaning beautiful, is descended from Hofsch, with the word Hof, meaning court. Presumably the notion was that only the rich had time to behave really well, and the poor should at least aspire to follow their example. What is and isn't generally acceptable changes all the time. There's a painting by the Dutchman Andreas Booth called Hunting Lice by Candlelight. It was painted in 1630, and it shows 4 men engaged in ridding a kneeling figure of unwanted vermin in his hair. This is not a procedure most people today would think of as an acceptable public practice. When I was at boarding school,